Hello, I'm Alan Kohler, founder of Eureka Report, which is now part of Intelligent Investor, finance presenter and columnist for the ABC.
And I'm James Thomson, senior Chanticleer columnist at the Australian Financial Review.
And we are the Money Café. Well, there's so much going on at the moment, James, it's hard to know where to start, but let's just catch up with what the latest is in the Middle East, which is, I think that Trump is, the latest I've seen is Trump is saying that he hasn't made up his mind whether he's going to go to war with Iran or not, but I think what's going on is he's hoping that Iran basically caves in before they do it.
Oh, I think that's right. We're recording on Thursday morning, Alan. I gather Trump has just entered the Situation Room, which sounds pretty cool, doesn't it?
Yeah, I wonder where it is.
Oh, don't know. Probably next to the dunny in the White House somewhere. Yeah, look, I think you're right. I think it's a bit of a wait and see. It's fascinating the way Trump and the White House's attitude has changed here, though. Like, we've gone from, we had nothing to do with these attacks. They're not asked to, it needs to be a ceasefire now to, we're going to wipe Iran off the map. It's just interesting to see how the narrative has changed, as it so often does with Trump.
Yeah, that's right. And he said that he put a post up saying that we know where the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei is, but I've decided not to kill him yet.
Yes.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. He's given him the ultimate ultimatum instead, which is just fantastic. But
I suppose the thing from our point of view that's really interesting about it is the markets have stayed calm. I mean, the oil price spiked on Friday, then went back down again, and it's been gradually rising in the last few days as things got a bit more tense, but nothing really dramatic. And the stock markets behaved itself as well.
Yeah, I guess I think the interesting sort of idea for me is this one that if Iran is sort of pushed into a corner and becomes increasingly desperate, does that raise the stakes of what it needs to do to what Iran needs to do to get out of this? There's a theory which I sort of get the logic of that Iran's only way to stop Iran will need to create some sort of disturbance, dislocation in the global energy market to try and rein in these attacks. But if it does that, it risks getting wiped off the map. So there's all these sort of, combinations and permutations. But equity investors just don't care. They don't care about anything. They don't care about trade risk. They don't care about hot war risk or cold war risk or any risk. They just want stocks to keep going up. It feels a bit odd to me that we're back to these very stretched positioning, very high valuations, very crowded markets, and none of the risks seems to even be considered. But there you go. I just, the momentum, the flows in markets are just so strong.
And did anything at all come out of G7 in Alberta, Canada?
No, I don't think so. I think we had a bit of a nothing burger from the G7. On Thursday morning, we had a nothing burger from the Fed. The Federal Reserve kept rates on hold. Poor old Jerome Powell's basically a lame duck now because Trump's going to announce his successor sometime in the next few months. So, yeah, we're in a bit of a holding pattern, I guess. And as you say, markets are taking the sort of no news is good news path and just edging higher.
I don't know how. That's amazing that you just said no news is good news.
Well, I know there's so much news.
There's so much news. Christ, unbelievable amount of news.
I know, but from the point of view of markets, none of this news is sort of upending their view that, stocks can keep rising on the back of AI and, relatively resilient global growth. So
yeah.
It's funny. You're totally right. There is endless news, and yet none of it seems to matter to markets.
I wonder about the extent to which AI is actually holding the share markets aloft. the sort of the expectation among investors that all these companies are going to make so much money that nothing else matters.
I think that's true to some extent. I mean, there's so much crowding into. It's not really the Magnificent Seven anymore so much. It's more crowding into, 4 stocks: Nvidia, Meta, Amazon, and Alphabet. They're the sort of Magnificent Four when it comes to AI. Microsoft as well. Sorry, so it's probably 5. But yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think it's right that's what investors are thinking about. I'm still not convinced that those 4 or 5 stocks are going to make piles and piles and piles of money.
What about the story during the week you wrote about that was amazing, that Meta's going around offering $100 million US sign-on bonuses for AI experts?
Yeah. And your first reaction is like yours, I think, Alan, a bit of disbelief, like, sorry, how much? And then when you think it through, it sort of is logical. People pay $100 million for soccer players and baseball players and basketball players all the time. Yeah, we've sort of become immune to that. Why shouldn't you pay $100 million for the best AI engineer in the world who you think can help you make trillions of dollars? Sort of logical. And if you think about Meta platforms, they're spending $72 billion this year alone, in investing in AI infrastructure. I mean, what's another 100 million?
The best part of that story, I thought, was that Sam Altman of OpenAI, the CEO of OpenAI, who's got they own ChatGPT, he kind of basically exposed these bonuses, but he said that his people are knocking them back.
Yeah.
So what's going on is not only is Meta offering $100 million US bonuses, the people are knocking them back.
Yeah, you gotta love that, don't you? Well, that's what he says anyway. My connection out of this though was it was interesting because it came on the same day that Amazon CEO Andy Jassy sent a memo to his workers saying, basically Amazon's going to be smaller in the next period because of AI. We're not going to need as many people. Doesn't mean we're going to sack lots of people, but we're not going to hire as many. We're going to be smaller. And you're seeing this message now from the likes of Telstra locally and CBA locally, and you're going to see it a lot more. And to me, there's a direct correlation between that message and these $100 million bonuses. And I should say it's $100 million US, so about $154 million in the Australian peso. And the correlations is, if you're investing that much money in infrastructure and people for AI, you're doing it because you think you're going to get a giant return. Why do you think you're going to get a giant return? Because you think customers are going to pay you to use your AI. Why would customers pay you to use your AI? Because it can reduce their costs. What's the biggest cost? Staff. So the reason those investments are being made in infrastructure and sign-on bonuses is because they think there's a big pot of gold, and that pot of gold only exists if AI increases productivity by reducing human labor. I mean, that's the...
Correct. I think that's absolutely right.
That's the blunt message.
I think that's true. And we've got the Productivity Roundtable coming up in August, which Jim Chalmers said yesterday would be held around the cabinet table.
Right.
In his speech, he did the speech at the National Press Club, and he said that basically it's going to be 3 days in August. And he gave the dates. I can't remember what they are, and they're going to be it's going to be around the cabinet table. Well, the cabinet table seats 25.
Right. Okay.
So there's 25 people getting an invitation, and I don't think you and I are getting an invitation. But anyway,
unbelievable.
I reckon they should spend at least 2 of those days, if not 3 of them, talking about AI.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, yeah.
I mean, the agenda is going to be set by the Productivity Commission's 5 pillars, right? So Chalmers, in December, commissioned the PC to come up with 5 reports on 5 pillars.
Yeah.
And they're kind of waffly things, like one of the pillars is digital, but it's kind of doesn't even specify AI. And it's all about education and so on, all of which are fine and worthy things. But, I think you need something specific. What are we going to do about AI?
Yeah.
And in particular, what's going to happen to all the people who lose their jobs?
I think that's totally right. I mean, didn't rate much of a mention in Chalmers' speech to the press club on Wednesday, did it?
No, that's right.
I think, yeah.
Well, I spoke to someone last night who said at dinner, someone saying that the big difference between America and Australia on AI is America has no rules.
Yeah.
So basically, companies can just do it and off they go. In Australia, it's all the whole approach to AI is all about regulation and the rules around it.
We're not trying to harness it. We're trying to put the guardrails in place, which look, I don't think that's necessarily a bad reaction. The problem is that, as you say, no one else is doing it, so it's not going to work. If you're a Australian company competing against six companies from overseas, two in America, three in India, one in Britain, whatever it is. I'm being rattling names off the top of my head. But if you're competing against those guys, and we've got rules in Australia, the ACT wants a right to refuse AI. Like, it's just not going to. You're going to be totally uncompetitive against your rivals from overseas. Like the genie cannot be put back in the bottle.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. So, I think we're just getting left behind on AI.
I know we sound like we might sound like doomers a bit, and maybe humanity's great ability to muddle through and adapt will shine out here, but it's a big change. It's a seriously big change.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. I think there's nothing more important, really, in terms of business. This is the thing, and in terms of productivity and economics. This is the main thing.
I think you're right.
And they ought to talk about it and get it settled. I mean, the unions are already saying that. Well, what has to be, what we have to discuss is how are workers going to share in the benefits of AI. And I get that, and particularly when they don't get sacked, and basically what's going on is in a particular company that AI is being used to improve the productivity of individual workers. Okay, so the workers should share in that. I get that.
Yep.
But yeah, a lot of the workers are just going to lose their jobs.
Yeah. What did you make of Chalmers' speech more generally?
Oh yeah, I look at. The main thing that was the headlines was tax reform, and he said that in order to get a sustainable budget, we need tax reform. But what he didn't say, of course, out loud, which is kind of the implication of that, is that we need more taxes, because the budget. I mean, this is the thing. We had tax reform in 1985 and in 2000, right? And 1985 was a tax summit, and what that resulted from, or the reason they had the tax summit was because Treasury told both Hawke and Keating, we haven't got enough money coming in, and we need more tax revenue. And so they put up a proposal to this tax summit, which had three new taxes: GST, capital gains tax, fringe benefits tax, and only two of those three got up, which was capital gains tax and fringe benefits tax. The GST idea, which was called Option C at that time, fell over because the Business Council opposed it. But GST popped up in 2000, the next big tax reform, and that happened again because Treasury told Howard, we haven't got enough money coming in. So we need to increase, we need to have more tax revenue, and you need to come up with a new tax. So Howard, who had gone to the election in 96 saying never ever have a GST, 2 years later, there it was. And now I think what's happened again is Treasury told Chalmers and Albanese, we haven't got enough money coming in. I mean, we've got an unsustainable deficit forever. And as Chalmers said in his speech, the expenses of aged care and NDIS are just going up, and also they have to spend more on defence. And they just simply they simply cannot find that money from elsewhere. in terms of cutting back somewhere else. They just can't. There's just not enough money available to be cut back, so they have to have increased taxes.
But
so go on.
I just found it interesting, Alan, though, that he sort of puts this tax reform thing out there and then says, sort of issues a warning to the media: don't do the rule something in or rule something out trick. Which I get the sentiment there. But then Chalmers himself goes and says, I don't think we'll be increasing the GST. Like, what other levers has he got to pull on?
Yeah, well,
it's not fuel excise, it's not tobacco excise.
Well, I recorded something yesterday for the ABC, which will run on Sunday night news, saying that the other lever is inheritance tax.
Yeah.
And, UK, US, a whole lot of other countries have inheritance taxes. And we don't, because we abolished them in the mid-70s.
Yeah.
So, we had an inheritance tax for 60 years, from 1915 to 1977 or so. And we've not had it for 50 years, and I think we've just got to have it back. We've got to have it back.
Yeah, well, I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago on how sort of the inheritocracy is changing the country. It's going to be an issue. I think that the superannuation change that Chalmers are sticking to increase the tax on earnings above 3 million, or earnings on balances above 3 million from 15 to 30%, is just a toe in the water of that, because at the moment the superannuation system basically subsidises inheritances, doesn't it? I mean, rich people get to build their wealth after they retire, thanks to superannuation. Yeah, no, that's right.
So, yes.
Just very quickly, Alan, another tricky thing for Chalmers coming up is what he's going to do on the Santos takeover. So Santos got a $38 billion takeover offer this week from a UAE company, ADNOC, Abu Dhabi National Oil Company.
It's the government. It's the government, isn't it?
It's the government, yeah. Abu Dhabi Inc. So Santos has been looking for a bidder for 2 years, finally gets one. But Chalmers is going to have to deal with the sort of difficult political and geopolitical question of whether we want sort of major energy infrastructure owned by a foreign government.
So tell me, do you think he'll knock it back or not?
I'm not sure. I think it's actually more complicated than it looks at first glance. I mean, the sort of populist answer is, yep, he'll knock this back. Of course he will. The more nuanced answer is, energy affordability, energy security is important. We probably need to get more gas out of the ground to manage this transition, and whether we like it or not, the UAE has got very deep pockets to do that, perhaps deeper than a publicly listed company that doesn't find it easy to get cash to do that. So I don't know. I think it's more complicated than it looks at first glance.
Well, we've got a lot of really good questions this week, so let's get stuck into them. And before we do that, let's have a quick word from our sponsor.
Want to take control of your financial future and sharpen your investing skills? InvestSmart's Bootcamp for Beginners is the perfect place to start. This flexible online course covers everything from the basics of investing to creating lasting wealth and building better money habits. Access on-demand videos for 3 months and learn at your own pace whenever it's convenient for you. Usually $99, Money Café listeners can save $50 with the code MONEY50. Head to investsmart.com.au/bootcamp and use MONEY50 to save big today.
First question's from Mark. Love the show. Submitting his first question. I note in the Wall Street Journal today that there is a story about the glut of office buildings that have emerged in the US as a result of remote working trends post-COVID. The WSJ article suggests there are tax incentives in place to encourage American developers to convert office buildings into residential apartments. Do we have a similar situation here in Australia where an office oversupply problem could be a short-term residential housing opportunity?
Go on. We do in theory, Mark. There's definitely no incentives to do that. There's been a few moves to try and convert offices to residential in the past, and there's a few going on at the moment. The problem is, Mark, it's bloody hard The shell of an office building is not all that useful to convert into residential apartments. Just think of the plumbing as a starting point.
Well, that's the main thing. I mean, the toilets are in the middle of an office building.
One place, yeah.
And there's one toilet on each floor. But what has to happen when you turn it into apartments is basically every office has to have an ensuite.
Yeah. There will be the other way you do it is that you take the office building, you knock the office building down and start again. We're probably not at quite at the place with the mix of construction costs and property values where that has become a viable alternative at the moment. So people are thinking about this, Mark, but there's definitely no incentives in place at the moment to try and encourage it.
Yes.
Your friendly neighbourhood shareholder Inactivist has 2 questions. Question 1, war is afoot in the Middle East. Efficiency in major markets has been derailed by tariffs. The biggest market in the world has a leader who is an economic nincompoop. Bond markets are in upheaval. Therefore, why are global equities at their peak? 3/4 of which in the aforementioned nincompoop-led country.
Yes.
Question 2, Alan, is what is Alan's response to scoring a 1 out of 100 in the Fame Meter, which is some sort of online tool? I can't believe that your ranking would be so low, Alan. But anyway, maybe we'll take.
Well, I'm not very famous, although I must say I did make it yesterday. Have you ever watched The Chase, which is the TV show?
Yeah.
It's a quiz show. Well, one of the questions yesterday was veteran Australian journalist Alan Kohler specialises in what field? A, sport, B, business, C, arts. So that was
wow.
So that's a question. That was a question on The Chase.
We're digressing here, but how did you feel about the veteran bit?
Oh yeah, well, crikey, I mean, I can't deny that. I'm 73, crikey.
It's a great question, though. Why are global equities at their peak? Alan?
No. Just before we finish The Chase, they got it wrong.
Oh no!
They said I'm an arts. They said the guy said I'm an arts journalist.
Well, you are a Renaissance man, but that's what a mistake! Wow, gosh. Can you please tell our shareholder Inactivist why global equities are at their peak?
Well, we've just been talking about that. We think it's a lot to do with AI, and certainly markets and investors are basically oblivious to what's going on around the world. They're just kind of focusing on all the money that they think companies are going to be able to make. And I think I actually think it's not just the companies that are doing AI, the 5 that you mentioned in the US, but also the feeling that the reason that companies are going to, all companies are going to employ AI is because that's going to improve their bottom line. So I think that there's a sense that profits are going to increase everywhere because of AI.
Yep. And I think the other thing is there's just still a lot of money flowing. Households, particularly in the US, retail investors are still very big on the market. Their proportion of assets in equities has never been higher. It's at a record. So there's a lot of money still sloshing around the world, and it's sloshing into equities, and they're being squeezed higher. So it doesn't quite make sense to me either, an activist, but that's what we get. Be careful out there.
Elliot says, do you think one of the biggest opportunities to improve productivity in Australia could come from abolishing state governments? Also, the answer is yes, Elliot,
Yes.
but that's not going to happen. So, they're kind of protected by the Constitution. Also, would you mind giving a shout-out to my economics class at Linda's Farn Anglican Grammar School? We're located on the New South Wales-Queensland border, so we're constantly navigating the challenges of overlapping state regulations. Yes.
Good, Elliot.
Hello, your economics class.
I'm not sure if Elliot's a teacher or a student, but good on you. It's good to see. My son is doing economics for the first time this year, and he's loving it, I must say. So I reckon it's great, and getting some real life example of state government overreach on the border there. Look, I don't think we're going to get anything that radical from the Productivity Roundtable, Alan, but it's not the worst idea, is it?
Oh, no. Yeah, that's fair enough.
Fraser says, I've been reading several studies and articles discussing the idea of dual interest rates for green projects. The ECB, the European Central Bank, appear to be considering the idea after Macron's endorsement at COP28. And broadly speaking, the infrastructure is already there to implement it. The idea is to effectively lower interest rates for green projects or raise interest rates for polluters. Do you think this could be a good strategy for reducing the carbon footprint in Australia and or encouraging green projects? You could even do it for mortgages, given that we have houses that achieve Green Star ratings.
Yes, well, it's just another way of putting a price on carbon, which I think is fair enough. I mean, there's just various ways of doing it, and that's one.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Alan, talking about tax reform in the context of Chalmers' speech. Ken Henry's been getting a fair bit of play recently with the idea of a revived carbon tax. So yeah, maybe that's one of the ideas that Chalmers is going to have to look at if we don't have if he's not going to touch the GST and he's scared of inheritance taxes. Maybe that's one of them.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah, that's right. That won't be helped by a differential interest rate. That won't raise money for the government, but raising,
yeah. I wonder if that's true. I wonder if a carbon tax is cleaner than a interest rate.
I think it is.
But it's an interesting idea.
Christian says, as someone who works in our National Science Agency, do you think there is a correlation between the decline in R&D investment and Australia's productivity? I believe long-term R&D is critical to producing high-impact, unique exports, and our lack of R&D spend is why we are lagging behind our OECD counterparts. You're absolutely right, Christian.
Absolutely right, Christian.
The key reason for Australia's declining productivity is a lack of business investment, in particular in R&D and also infrastructure.
Yep, totally right. And what do we favour often over R&D, Alan? At a corporate level, an ASX level?
Dividends,
yay.
So a big part of Australia's decline in productivity is the dividend franking system that we have uniquely in Australia, which basically virtually forces companies to disgorge large amounts of money to shareholders rather than reinvesting in the businesses. Someone was telling me last night, the problem is, and this person is trying to compete against Amazon. Amazon doesn't pay a dividend, has never paid a dividend, and basically just invests billions and billions of dollars into the business. They find it very difficult to compete.
I think just from the corporate sector, Alan, like an example of a company that does invest in R&D for the long term, CSL. One of our great Australian global companies never drops its R&D spend, always thinks 20 years ahead with its drug development because it has to. That's the way it works. And what do you get? You get a, highly profitable, globally powerful company that, is a consistent performer and a consistent returner of capital to shareholders. You can have both if you stay the course. So I'm with you, Christian. R&D all the way with R&D.
Next question.
My Seamus says, my question is, does economics generally, and specifically the reporting of economics, have a problem with blaming labour input costs and shortages for all the problems in the economy? I note two key examples. Firstly, the RBA, which at the start of the rate rising cycle was so worried about a wage price spiral, has now tamed inflation without getting mass unemployment and has now meekly dropped rhetoric about a NIRU, which is I can't remember.
Non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment.
Thank you. From its guidance. Another example relates to the difficulty in building new housing supplies, in which many, including Stephen Mayne, tout importing tradies as a solution to weak productivity in the building construction industry, but not the astronomical cost of materials or the fact that in some cities more than half the cost of a new build are government charges. Surely tackling some of these input costs should be talked about more rather than wage suppression in a time of stagnant or declining wage growth.
Well, speaking for myself, I talk about them a lot. And there's no doubt the labour shortage is a problem, and so are the number of taxes that are imposed on property developers, and also the cost of building materials. Yep, it's all true.
It's all true, but Alan, in almost every business, wages are the largest cost. So that's why we focus on it. It matters the most.
Yeah,
like there's just no way around that, Seamus. I get your point, but it's just wages matter most. That's why we focus on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Michael says, love the show. Have been listening a few years now. An enjoyable way to stay on top of the current finance news. Last week, when talking about the 20% HEX reduction policy, Stephen Mayne said Dutton perhaps should have matched it. That was right. This was right after he said it was a bad policy. This seems like a bit of a contradiction. However, I think he was probably right. This raises an interesting point about the current state of politics in Australia. Voters are responding to handouts that provide them with individual gain rather than a gain for society as a whole. Yes. There's probably no need to go on here, but that's right.
Well, he says, let me pose a question to you, Alan.
Yes.
What Michael's suggesting is, do we need a bit of a sort of bipartisan approach to politics so we don't get this? We actually get some proper reform, not just both sides matching stupid ideas. Here's an idea. What did you say? There were 25 seats around the cabinet table for the Productivity Pow-Wow?
Yes.
Should 5 of them be coalition members? I'm serious.
Yeah, no. The reason I'm laughing is because they'd be terribly uncomfortable. they'd be, oh crikey, what am I doing here?
But is it? I don't know. Is it a crazy idea?
Yeah, interesting. Well, they're going to be out of power for at least 6 years, possibly longer.
Well, there you go. Well, I'm just throwing it out there for Michael.
I think Michael's right that it'd be great if we had bipartisan approach, but really that's not the way it works.
Yeah. Alex says, why do councils tax capital improvements via rates? Do they want to minimise investment in housing? Why don't they just tax land values?
Right. So they should leave out the value of the house. Houses tend to depreciate in value rather than go up. It's land that goes up. So I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the answer to that one is.
I think that the councils want to capture when somebody does a big renovation or knocks the house down and builds another one, that they don't miss out on the value that's created, I guess.
Yeah.
Jonathan says, my mate Steve reckons John Howard is the greatest perpetrator of inequality, wealth divide and destruction of national assets in history. Maybe. Is he correct? If not, who would beat him? I believe Steve is referring to some of the changes Howard made to property investing, private health, privatisation of national assets, and Iraq invasion and war, the changes to super, such as the $2 million earning completely tax-free returns, the relaxed rules about putting $1 million extra into super balances and wasting resources booms such as offshore gas and so on. Yeah, I might have missed some things. I don't think you did, Steve.
I love everything about this question. My mate Steve. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. It's hard to say. I guess I would say to Jonathan's mate Steve that this is a global problem. It's not a the tailwinds, or if you want to call it that, of very low or falling and very low inflation and falling and very low interest rates have helped push up sort of asset prices and increase inequalities as well. Those policies might not have helped, but it's not like anyone else has turned them, backtracked on them either. So I don't know. I'm not sure I'd be blaming one person, but
yeah. I do think. Look, I must say, I do think that it's not hard to be quite down on Mr. Howard for his contribution to inequality, no doubt about it. And I think the super changes are a big part of it. The removal of reasonable benefit limits and making superannuation tax-free after 60, I think that was a big problem. I think the health things, property investing, all the things he did on property, in particular the capital gains tax discount, I think was a big mistake. So look, I think, I think Steve's onto something there.
Good on you, Jonathan and Steve. All right, Richard says, would it satisfy those with balances over $3 million in superannuation complaining about the government moving the goalposts and then subjecting them to a 30% tax on unrealised gains if the government gave them a once-off opportunity to transfer out early before retirement any assets or funds worth over, say, $2.5 million, so they could access it, invest it, and have it taxed under the usual tax rules? Their super fund would still serve its original purpose of guaranteeing them a comfortable retirement, and they couldn't complain about any bait and switch on their superannuation investment.
Yes, but Richard, that would take away the God-given right that everyone has to pay only 15% tax on earnings.
It's an excellent question, though, isn't it?
No, it's true. Yeah.
Like, what do you want here? It's a great question. Like,
what everyone wants is to just keep paying 15% tax on earnings on the entire super balance, no matter how big it is. Fair enough. That's what they want. And, I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, no. It's a great question, though, Richard. Well done.
AIJA says, I believe a Melbourne law firm intends to bring a High Court case that will test the tax deductibility of childcare costs as a legitimate expense incurred in earning an income. My question is, what would be the implication for tax revenue, rebate scheme, childcare industry, etc., if childcare expenses were treated as a legitimate tax deduction? Well, I think it's a bit like dental in Medicare. It really ought to be there. I mean, your mouth is just as important as the rest of your body.
Yeah.
But it costs too much. They can't do it.
Yeah.
So they won't, you could absolutely make an argument that childcare is a legitimate business expense or working expense, but, they won't do it.
No, that's right. I mean, it gets back to that our chat at the top about Treasury. It's another area where Treasury would just have to say to the government, the pie doesn't stretch that far, my friends.
That's right.
Tim says, I've been an avid listener of your podcast and avid reader of your material on housing. It's very clear you're a fantastic advocate for increasing supply. Feels like it's caught the government's attention, albeit too late, but I wonder why we never talk about the roles banks can play in getting more people into the market while we wait for more stock to become available. Mortgages seem to be the only tool available to acquire a home, with various government concession schemes on offer, all leading to the same outcome. Why isn't society or government putting more pressure on our very profitable banks to come up with an alternative solution beyond the traditional mortgage? Have we become complacent, or has it become too much of a cash cow to warrant research and development?
Like what? What's the alternative to a mortgage? Look, I think you're right, Tim, that there's not enough discussion about the role of banks in the housing affordability crisis, i.e.
Maybe.
Eh?
I think maybe.
No, well, you're saying that there is plenty of discussion.
I think there's plenty of discussion, yeah.
Yeah,
how many times do you hear it discussed about, we should get rid of the mortgage serviceability buffer and just let it rip? I mean, that's the only option, isn't it?
I suppose.
But all that does is allow more credit into the system and pushes up house prices.
Well, that's it. So, I think that the two problems with the banks is that they went from being rationers of credit to being marketers of credit, and secondly, the APRA changed the kind of the capital rules to lower the capital needed to back a residential mortgage or a real estate mortgage, and so the banks are all falling over themselves to have mortgages, real estate mortgages, because it requires less capital. And maybe rather than increasing the willingness of banks to lend on housing, they should wind it back in some way.
Yeah. Well, certainly. I mean, you think about productivity. It's not the banks aren't lending to the most productive parts of the economy. They know it too, and they see it as a problem. And particularly when they're all making next to no money on mortgages because they've competed all the gains away. So, yeah.
John says, can I suggest that the nuance that counts, the detail rather than globalisation? For example, James, farmers are being screwed by poor supermarket duopoly. My question relates to our current unproductive business environment where a large number of the key major corporates are making record profits. Supermarkets, banks, insurance companies, gas power companies, social media, miners. Competition is good, isn't it? But we have a crisis of competition in this country. So has the fourth estate become cowed by advertising revenue, not clamouring for what makes a market a market? So are you cowed, James?
Totally. I live in fear constantly of being told from above, look, John, that's just not how the world works. Alan's worked in the media all his life. He'll tell you. I know he works for the ABC now, so it's not an issue for him. But it's just not how it works. We don't get directives from on high. Our advertisers want you to say this. We don't even get those directives from our editors. We follow the news where it goes. We try and understand everything. You're right. We don't have enough competition in this country, and we're trying to improve that. There's a suite of new merger laws that have merger reforms that are coming into place in about 10 days. But unfortunately, some of the decisions we've made in the past, the horse has bolted. What I say on competition, though, is what do you think the right, like how do you determine the right level of competition? Like everybody says the banking sector's, wildly uncompetitive. There's four major banks out there and a bunch of other little ones that are slitting each other's throats to get to sell you a mortgage. I mean, I just...
banks are competitive. I actually think supermarkets are pretty competitive too. I mean, Aldi is...
Well, that's because you've been cowed. You could say that.
Yeah, I know that Coles and Woolies have got a big share of the market, but I reckon Aldi's eating their lunch.
Yeah,
as it were.
So look, I get what you're saying, John. I don't disagree with you. Competition is good. We do have some companies making record profits. They're not supermarkets and banks, though. Insurance companies have got it very good at the moment. Gas and power companies aren't making record profits. Miners aren't making record profits. But other than that, your argument stands up.
Probably got time for, say, two more questions. Your turn.
Meredith says, I was interested to hear your comments about the sustainability of private hospitals. 70% of health services costs are workforce, so the cost of healthcare is largely about what we pay doctors. Why do people care? Why do people who care for the sick need to be the highest paid workers in the nation? No one ever mentions this obscenity.
Yes.
Well, a good point, I guess.
It's not true that all people who care for the sick...
My doctor gets paid well, though, I've got to say.
What's that?
I don't mind if my doctor gets paid well, I've got to say, and probably the guy flying or the guy or girl flying the plane.
I don't know that GPs are making a lot of money. I suppose surgeons are, and certainly nurses are not, and aged care workers and all the other people who care for the sick are definitely being underpaid. But there's a few surgeons cleaning up. That's true.
Yeah.
So I don't know what should be done about that.
Tough one. Yeah.
I don't know. One more. Alan says, with the government foreshadowing a productivity roundtable in August and signalling they're looking for innovative ideas, can each of you put up 3 innovative ideas, solutions as to how this wicked problem might be addressed? Depending on your answers, at the very least, it should set you up for invitations to attend from the PM. I think we're not getting invitations somehow.
Is there anything really springs to mind for you, Alan?
Well, I do think, I said before, and I think it's true, that they should spend at least one of the days talking about AI and not just kind of in theory about it, but and how the spoils should be shared, but specifics about how companies are using AI, and in particular, the key to getting the most out of AI is the prompt. And I should tell listeners that I interviewed someone during the week who's a consultant about it. His name's Henry Badgery. He was interviewed on Intelligent Investor, and he's got a little business consulting on AI, but he's also launched a product called Prompt Cowboy. And so if you Google Prompt Cowboy and go to the website, you key in what you think the prompt should be that you write into ChatGPT, and it will tell you the best way to word the prompt. And it's usually much longer than you think. Like I put in a couple of prompts and it came back with like five or six paragraphs, long paragraphs of the prompt, which you then copy and put into ChatGPT or whatever the AI that you're using is. And it comes up with a much better answer. So the key to getting the most out of AI is the prompt. And this bloke's setting up what he calls a prompt library. And so one way the government could actually help companies use AI is to help set up a prompt, the government's prompt library and assistance. I don't know, but that'd be something specific they could do.
I'm going to give 2 suggestions, Alan. One builds off yours. I reckon our education system has spent the last few years fearing AI. What are kids doing? Are they just cheating? Are they just using ChatGPT and other things to cheat, and they're not learning anything? I reckon we need to flip that on its head. How can we teach and educate kids in primary school, secondary school, and university to use AI and harness it and get the most out of it, because it is going to be part of their working lives, whether they like it or not. So this defensive setting that we've got, that needs to change. That's one idea. And the other idea for me is the GST. Like that's at the heart of tax reform. I think tax reform can really help engender productivity, and I don't think the GST should be taken off the table. I think that the Treasurer's right. Don't do the rule in, rule out thing, and you've got to think about the GST.
Maybe you mean increasing it?
Increase. Maybe it needs to increase. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
I mean, what's another fairer way of doing it?
Well, the problem with GST is that it's a regressive tax. It's the same. Poor people pay more because they spend more of their income.
Yeah, but did we set it up in the right way? Does it need to move? I don't know. I don't think it should be ruled out. If the Treasurer is right, don't rule anything in or out.
Yeah, I personally would rather see, if we're going to do something really hard, I'd personally rather see an inheritance tax than a GST increase.
Yeah, fair enough.
But that's just me.
Let's put it all on the table.
Let's. Okay, thanks everyone for listening to today's episode of Money Café. I'll be back next week with Stephen Main. Send in your question to themoneycafe@eurekareport.com.au. Until then, I'm Alan Kohler, founder of Eureka Report and finance presenter and columnist for the ABC.
And I'm James Thomson, senior Chanticleer columnist at the Australian Financial Review.